let's get to, as we got a little sappy about our boys there, but let's get to our draft profile. And John, it would not be an Anthony draft season, an Anthony draft profile entry without a USC Trojan.
Should have known. He's got the Los Angeles hat on.
I know.
Should have known.
Los Angeles of Anaheim. I don't know. Whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. But look, really in this draft, to me, I mean, there are some other players in this draft on the Trojan side of things that, later in the draft you could maybe look at, but there's two really star players in this draft for the Trojans. Really rough season, the past couple, I guess, for USC, and hopefully they're going in a different direction here under Lincoln Riley as he shot over to LA from Oklahoma. Regardless, the two big players in this year's draft for the Trojans both share the same first name, Drake. Yeah. There is Drake London, the wide receiver, who is essentially it's kind of Michael Pittman plus, a leaner, kind of a little bit of T. Higgins in there, a little bit of Michael Pittman in there, a little bit of AJ Green in there. Looks like a pretty good player, maybe not as fast as an AJ Green and whatnot, but a guy who seems to be a pretty good player. But I'm going to focus on the Drake on the other side of the ball, and that is Drake Jackson, who is an edge defender and outside linebacker. And I'm going to put up a video here for you all to enjoy. This is a little bit on Drake Jackson here. I'm probably gonna sit here and say Drake London accidentally like 4 times, but Drake Jackson, a guy who's an edge/outside linebacker. You see the stats here: 6'3", 253. He is a junior. He's only 20 as we speak. Middle of this month of April, he turns 21 right before the draft, so he is young. 34-inch arms. Pretty good vertical, 36.5, broad jump, 127 inches there. So a guy that has, here's the thing with him, John, a guy that has a lot of speed. Now, we don't have a 40 time for him yet, so we don't have that to really gauge, but a guy who really shoots off on film in terms of his get off of the edge. There are questions, there are concerns, but there is a lot of upside here. And when you look at some of the stats and accolades from last year, he had 5 sacks, and you go, well, that's not super lofty. 8 tackles for loss, okay. He was a second-team All-Pac-12 selection, both by the Associated Press and Pro Football Focus. And then, of course, he had a pretty good score overall from PFF, 82.2, and 87.7 pass rush grade from Pro Football Focus last year. But like I said, there are some questions, there are some concerns, and there is a high ceiling for this player. You look at, okay, is he going to be, kind of a stand-up outside linebacker that occasionally rushes? Is he going to be a hand-in-the-dirt edge guy? Is he going to do, what is he going to do at the pro level here? And you see here the pros. I said uber athletic. You see the positional flexibility. Maybe you look at the outside linebacker / edge defender as a plus. You have a guy who's done a little bit about both. And like I said, young and ascending, going back to those PFF grades I mentioned earlier. The PFF grades year after year keep climbing by about, I think, 10 to 15 points per year. So that's something you like to see, especially as a younger player in this class. What position is he, right? And what if he was to go with the Bengals, what would they do with him? You had weight fluctuation at some points. He was in the 230s. He got up to 250. I think scouts still think that he needs to potentially bulk up a bit and add a little bit more weight as he enters the pros. But again, speed, he's a guy that can come off the edge very quickly. A lot of folks have him going in the second round, John, and we're going to do our mock draft in a little bit, and we'll see exactly, what shakes out there. I think if you're going to draft him on night 2, which is where he's slated to go, especially early night 2 in the second round, you have to do so with patience because he's young, like I said, and you have to figure out how he's going to fit in immediately, and you probably got to give him a year or two. And it's one of those kind of boom or bust guys that you take a chance on in the second round. But I think if you use him correctly and you find out what he does best for your defensive system, he's a guy that could be a pretty good pass rusher as he grows in the NFL.
So a couple questions here. I believe he got injured late in the season. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there was 2 games he missed last year, I want to say.
So
2 or 3.
it wasn't like a huge injury where because he still tested,
Right.
at least.
Yeah, it wasn't like a major thing. No.
Okay, so that's good. So he's only 20, going to be 21. I think the overall youth is a big part of his profile because he's ascending as a player. Like he ascended in the building at USC, and then he finally like popped off as a true junior, as like I guess a 20-year-old player in the Pac-12. And I think that in terms of like the NFL teams looking at him, he's a guy who's like yet to play his best football, and that would warrant, I guess, a premium pick because the skill set that he currently has, like that flexibility around the edge, that explosion, that's rare, right? Like Von Miller is the golden standard, and we've
Mm-hmm.
seen how valuable Von Miller has been for the last decade. Drake Jackson has an ability like that, like not of the level of Von Miller, but that asset in your repertoire is rare to get under tackles, punches, and to add that explosion and bend to any pass rush. And I don't even think the Bengals necessarily have that. Like I think with Joseph Osai, like his overall flexibility in his hips, I think is still something that's unknown with him. He's definitely fast and explosive, and that's where he got a lot of his production in his one preseason game. But I think Jackson is a little bit more like Gumby, like he's just more flexible maybe. And I think that's a dimension that the Bengals don't have. My other question though is if he's, let's just say, subpar against the run right now because of his leaner build. One,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think the teams would entertain him as like a 3-4 guy because they need those guys to set the edge in those 2-point stances. And I don't think he's quite ready for that. He might not be ready to do anything more than just like a role player at this point. But 2, I don't know how early the Bengals would invest in a guy who can't stop the run at this point. I think when you look at the defensive linemen that they like to invest in, they like complete players. And I think Osai was, hyper enough as a defender where he made plays against the run where they were comfortable with that, even though he was kind of raw. With Jackson, if he's completely one-dimensional, and I'm not saying that's bad because being able to rush the passer is completely more valuable, but the fact that he's just not at a competent level of setting the edge and defending the run and making plays against the run, I do wonder how early the Bengals would invest in a player like that.
I agree with you. Here's the thing. And by the way, I know we get a little bit of flack on some of our comments when we do these prospect profiles, when we use potentially Twitter videos from other sources. Got to throw out a disclaimer that YouTube, where we stream and our channel and whatnot, they get real picky in terms of us putting on different videos if we don't cite them correctly, etc. So I don't really dig copyright infringements, and I don't really dig getting slapped on the wrist by YouTube personally. So if it takes using a tweet video and citing that person properly, sorry, I'm going to do that. That being said, here's Seth Galina and a recent tweet here. And here's the bend you're talking about and the get around the edge. See the dip?
Yeah.
The dip under the tackle.
Rare.
That's what you're talking about. Let's watch it again here. That's what I saw a lot of. The dip under the tackle to get past. And even though that play right there did not result in a sack, that's a pressure and a play that, NFL people like to see. I'm going to share this tweet here. This isn't a video. This is just Adam Schefter talking here, just to note that teams are very interested in this player. This is as of yesterday, I want to say. And you see there, defensive end outside linebacker Drake Jackson has 13 visits over the next few weeks per source. Jackson is about to hit and stay on the road. So teams are calling right now. Again, I agree with you with the run stop issue, but I also think that goes into where do you play him if you're kind of wanting him to do more outside linebackers to traditional outside linebacker-ish things, then maybe that is a trait that you wish he had. If you are saying this is initially a niche pass rusher and will develop into a little bit more of a true edge rusher as he gets older, adds more bulk, etc., then you kind of go, maybe we sacrifice that a little bit for that bend, that ability to get around the edge that you saw as a pass rusher. Again, a guy, he's not a perfect prospect at this time, especially with the age and development that needs to take place, but there's a lot of athleticism there. There's a lot of speed there. It's a matter of getting to the right guy and having them develop this player into a productive NFL player because the traits are there.
The traits are there, and just going back to that, like I think he has above average explosion as noted by his testing drills, and that only helps with that bend because like let's go back to a guy like Osai who's incredibly fast and incredibly explosive. If Osai has like average bend, that get off of the line of scrimmage, the way that he's able to cover so much ground in the first 2 or 3 steps, it gains him ground against the tackle where he doesn't have to bend that much to get under him and to run around the arc. With Jackson, he doesn't even need like that big of a get off. He can just bend from wherever, like he can create the top of the arc wherever he is because he can get around a tackle so easily with that flexibility. And that's why it is rare. But I like what you said about finding the right fit, the right situation for him. I think Marion Hobby has proven his worth as a defensive line coach. Like they have most of the same staff there to continue working with these guys. As far as like a role will go, like obviously he wouldn't play in front of Hubbard or Hendrickson. He probably wouldn't even play above Osai, but they need a guy. They need a fourth guy. They need someone to challenge Osai. They need someone new blood injected there because right now they have young guys and Cameron Sample and Khalid Kareem, and we can throw Wyatt Hubert in there, but none of those guys are either proven or really any good right now, honestly. Like it's a lot of unknowns, and they need some form of production, some form of athleticism there if, God forbid, something happens to either Hendrickson or Osai, because they already lost Osai for an entire year, and it was basically the Trey Hendrickson show. So honestly, it's an interesting question, like if they're really interested or serious about adding to this position group, because they have a ton of bodies, but it's not a lot of bodies that they can count on right now.
Yeah, and I think that this is a little bit of a sneaky need. And you saw some things come up at the end of the postseason run there when the Bengals were a little depleted in terms of Larry Ogunjobi getting out of the lineup with an injury, and just they had to create blitz opportunities to potentially get sacks and pressures and whatnot. You talk about Mike Hilton making a couple plays, and it was basically like you said, Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard played his butt off, played a ton of snaps, had a couple of nice moments, but the consistent pressure or some semblance of consistency with pressure off the edge, it just was lacking a little bit as the season wore on, and having that extra, whether that is Osai, whether that is Jackson, whether it's both, having that extra just rotational person you can bring in there. I like Cam Sample. Cam Sample doesn't have the juice that Drake Jackson or Joseph Osai appears to have. I think Sample's a nice player to have on that line. You can move him around a couple of different spots, but this is a completely different guy. This is a guy that is tall, lean, and has got speed and a lot of different athletic traits you like.
Real quick, there was a comment or under like the Schefter tweet from like the golfing dad, and he was chastising Schefter for calling US or Southern Cal USC because the real USC is in South Carolina. Any thoughts on that?
To each their own. That's my thought on that. I guess if that's what I just seems like an odd thing to get up in arms about if you're on Twitter, but people do that, I guess. So I don't. It's regional, I guess.
Growing up, USC was always Southern Cal to me. I didn't even know USC was an acronym for South Carolina until I got older. So I'm on your side here.
Yeah, and I think also as SC has struggled the last couple of years here, maybe they have lost their stranglehold on the.
Well, I mean, what is Southern Carolina done? God, I'm saying Southern Carolina now.
Southern Carolina and South California, right? Well, I don't have too much more to add there on Drake Jackson, but a guy that is very intriguing, a guy I think can help a team pretty immediately in terms of what he can provide, at least in a limited standpoint, a limited niche package pass rush standpoint. You got to give him time to develop, though, especially with the age. Add a little bit of bulk to him because he is younger, and see what develops there. You got to be patient with him, but I think if you get him in the right spot, you are patient with him, and you work with him, this is a pick that would pay off in a good way down the road.
For sure. It's just a matter of, honestly, like how much are they prioritizing the position, and where does Jackson fall on their board of best available players? Like it could be a situation where maybe they're not truly looking at an edge in the second or third rounder, but like in the second round, if a lot of their other targets have gone off and Jackson is still there, again, a young athletic guy who can help them out immediately and grow into a bigger role, would make a lot of sense.
It would.